The black, shiny coffin stood open. Everyone could see who laid in the casket. All around, people cried. Some were silent, some looked to be in pain, and some merely stared into the distance, lost in thoughts of the one that passed. The ground had already been dug out, and all that was left was to say goodbye one last time. Everything after was just another step towards smiling instead of crying when they thought of them. Can you feel it? That feeling of sadness and loss? This feeling is one that many people have experienced more than once, many of whom attend or work at DGS. This feeling is known as grief, and after the death of a loved one, it seems to consume most of our lives. Someone who has had this feeling all of his life is Assistant Principal Vince Walshrock.
I had an older sister that died, but she died before I was born. So I didn't know her, but her presence has been in my family. When I was in high school, and my best friend died here at South in a car accident. Snowplow hit him on the corner of 63rd and Fairview. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And the next morning we all met in the speech room, which is the same speech room that we have today. About 100 of us in there. And no one said anything. I don't remember everybody giving it. And I just remember being in that space together and actually looking out in the lagoon. That's only one memory of it. And just in really appreciating the closeness of the team. But that was an important experience. And then the following year I had another really good friend die in high school. He had died in heart surgery, had a heart defect. Wasn't expected to die, and he did. He sat next to me in choir. And same kind of thing, right? Just close-knit people, experienced it together. Everybody was in shock that Paul had died. But when I moved into this role, those experiences really sat with me.
Junior Izzy Johnson is yet just another person here at DGS to experience the loss of a loved one at a very young age.
My mom passed away when I was in 3rd grade. She was dropping my grandma off for cancer treatments, and as she was pulling out of the parking lot, she had a heart attack and fell forward. And then as she was hitting on the gas, she drove forward into a pond. So if she hadn't have driven into the pond, then she probably would have lived. But I feel like my kind of response was kind of denial almost. Everyone was always being really nice and bringing over home cooked meals because they thought that after such a loss that we couldn't really function. And I was just no, my mom's not dead. She's just somewhere else right now. She's not dead. And everyone was always just kind of dancing around the topic when it came to me because I was so young. And even now, as I'm a junior in high school 8 years later, there's no real way for me to fully accept what happened.
As she grew older and entered high school, she recognizes what DGS has done to support her through the grieving process.
I know that my freshman year here, when they were doing the whole counselors meet your students or whatever, I went to my counselor and I kind of told her what had happened because she asked me about it. And I feel since then I've gotten a lot of support from the counselors here and the social services here because they kind of know my situation and they don't force me to talk about it, but they know it's there. And I've gotten a lot more support through that too, with them putting me into groups and making sure they check up on me every now and then. So
similar to Johnson's story, English teacher Riley Love lost her brother in a highway accident during construction on May 13th, 2015, killing him, the driver in front of him, and injured a third. Her family settled in a civil suit against the truck company instead of criminal charges.
Specifically for me because he was young, he was healthy, it was totally out of the blue. It was a real shock to the system. And through a strange turn of events, I was the first person notified in our family. So I also had to call my parents and let them know. So my mom and dad are divorced, so I had to call my mom separately, my dad separately, and then my brother was engaged, so I had to, let his fiance know too. But it was, and that sometimes I will have like flashbacks about, is just like how that happened, how I felt confused.
After the accident, Love took time off from work, where she was supported by all of the staff and students at DGS.
I will say that this school was very supportive. My department was amazing at going in and talking to students and creating lessons for me, so that week I did not have to think about it. And then I like to spend a lot of times with my students developing relationships. So this happened in May. Luckily we had most of the year, and my students were really great. Like one class threw a party the day they thought I was going to come back. I actually took an extra day, and they were like, we had this whole party. But kids are sending me notes and just being very, very sweet.
Much like Love, senior Bailey McCoy experienced the same support from DGS when her grandfather passed away shortly before DGS's own bowling coach, John Ryan.
We kind of all knew it was coming. With him living in Washington, it was a little difficult on my mom. I could see how it affected my mom, because she's the oldest on that side, and it's her dad, So I basically told all my teachers it could happen any minute now, where my mom needs to call me out and we're going to Washington. We had an emergency bag packed, and my mom got a phone call one night and was like, okay, your dad hasn't woken up all day. And I was like, okay, we're on our way. It was 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday night, so I emailed all my teachers in the car. I'm like, I'm leaving. Don't know when I'll be back. And when we got there, he actually woke up and was a little bit respondent, so that was nice. I got to say goodbye, basically. We were there for, I don't even remember, 2 weeks maybe, 3 weeks. So that was hard, missing all that much school. It's hard. Every now and then I have my moments where I just cry and cry and cry, and I cry with my mom. All my teachers last year were really understanding, and my counselor and I are like super close, so he's helped a lot.
Grief is a common experience among the staff and students at DGS. Love believes that because each person grieves in a different manner, there are many different ways to help them in their time of grief.
There are a lot of catchphrases that people will use and different people find comfort from different ones, or they're mad at all of them. So we're not a family where something like this happened for a reason or he's in a better place made us feel better at all. But then there'd be other things where some people would feel good. Like my dad might like it and I would hate it. People would say, I have no words. There's no words for what happened to you. And my dad would be like, there's right, there are no words. And I would be like, then stop talking. So I think what I came to understand is there is no perfect way, but just asking people how they feel and letting them approach it in the way they want it is helpful. So I would say, take all the time you need, and it's totally okay. And there are going to be other people who have gone through the loss of the same family member as you, but all of the surrounding details might be different. But the other thing I'd say is it's so important to get help. So I took a long time grieving, and I'm still grieving, but it's not nearly as bad. But I also immediately made sure I was in therapy, and we did a lot of, I don't want to say work, but there was a lot of time spent where even if I didn't think that was the issue, it came back to the issue, and that was extremely helpful.
As the year progresses, Walsh Rock encourages students and staff to reach out for help at DGS.
If there was a student loss, teacher loss, those are two examples. Death by suicide, any kind of loss like that. We institute our crisis plan, and I manage the crisis plan. So I call, we're on crisis plan, we're in crisis response. And so I have a meeting in the morning. We may be visiting classes to work with students who might have had that teacher or that student in their class. We give strategies, thoughts, give a chance for students to process what's going on, and we identify students that need a more intensive response. And then we work with those students throughout the day and manage that caseload, follow up with parents, and then continue to follow up with students after that. It's when people isolate that we get concerned. And I think when you're connected and you're not isolated, even though you're moving through those stages, you have people around you to help ground you in that process. One is, don't rush the process. It's going to be really not so pleasant. It's not going to be, there's going to be some pain involved in it. But all that's pretty natural response. And giving yourself permission to experience the pain, experience the loss, and talk about it, and know that there's no prescriptive time frame on when to get over it.
If you or a student you know is struggling with grief, please take advantage of what DGS has to offer. Find a counselor, a teacher, a social worker, a psychologist, a friend, anyone who can aid you in your journey to emotional healing. Thank you for listening.